Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast, the ultimate blueprint to self-love and inner peace. I'm your host, Danielle Van. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, a life coach to women, meditation teacher, and author, I've spent my life studying and learning from the stories that make us human. It's my passion and goal to help you shift your mindset and create a lifelong revolution to help you reach your greatest potential. As we move into the holiday season, many of us find ourselves experiencing loneliness. Is that you? Loneliness is interesting because it's one emotion that can exist even if you have quality relationships in your life and people that you love and respect. In fact, it's a universal emotion, meaning most of us experience it at one time or another. So this week, we're taking a one-on-one deep dive into what loneliness actually is, how it smothers our self-love, the difference between being alone and feeling lonely, and how to make small shifts to release this self-defeating behavior. Sometimes we just need a helping hand to see that we're not as lonely as we think we are. So let's dive right in. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast starts right now. Okay, so over the next 5 weeks, we're going to take on some big emotions and behaviors that keep us from owning our lives and really have us constantly downgrading our self-love in a few one-on-one deep dives. Normally we have the deep dives and then we have conversations with other people. But for the next 5 weeks, I really want to make sure that we are setting a really positive foundation for this upcoming year. Sure, we do something very similar in some form or fashion in every episode, to create this way of owning our lives and self-love. But this is going to be a little bit of a different journey. How? We're going to take some time to really identify some fundamental pieces that get in the way of our self-love. And what I want us to do is to have the skill set to not only identify them, but to quickly shift them. So the conversations won't be as long or detailed, but instead really narrowing down into the specific behavior and giving you a few ways to begin to shift. I want us to get into a mindset that as we start the new year, we can do so with a fresh mindset, perspective, and emotional regulation, right? Because that's the only way that we can get out of the cycles that don't work for us is to identify some of the things that stand in our way. So let's get started with one of the biggest and honestly most challenging emotions many women come into session holding, but do not know what to do with them. And that emotion is not what you might think it is. It's not fear. It's not anger. It's actually loneliness. As I said just a few minutes ago, loneliness is a universal emotion that most of us experience at one time or another during our lifetime. We are social animals. We thrive in a community. We want to herd together, right? Naturally in families. We want connectivity because we need it. So much of our outside validation gives us pause and really feel good by giving ourselves internal validation. Of course, I want you to always validate first and then outward, not the other way around. But we're really conditioned to look for other people's approval. And so when we are not connected, guess what? We feel like we are not very valuable. We feel that we are not connected with ourselves or even the world around us. And it really hampers us from getting into self-love and inner peace. So let's drill down and talk about loneliness today. So many of us feel lonely, and most of that is because of the fast-paced world we live in. It's also due to social media. We are constantly comparing our lives. We're constantly looking at other people, what they have, what we don't have, or what we're dealing with and other people don't have to deal with. But it goes a lot deeper than that. And so let's look at the definition of loneliness. According to the APA, the American Psychological Association, they define loneliness as a cognitive discomfort, meaning a thinking discomfort, or an uneasiness of being or perceiving oneself to be alone. I want you to hold on to that last part, the perceiving of someone being alone, because it's extremely important and it's something we're going to talk about in just a moment. But as for that definition, it really boils down to loneliness is a mental or emotional state, and it can be both, that can generally feel distressing, right? This amount of distressing discomfort, where we feel that there is a gap. That's an important word, gap, between our desires and the experience we are having. That gap is so important to witness because many of us feel completely alone even when we're surrounded by people all day long, or even when we have solid relationships, or we're a part of an active community that works to build us up. We can even feel seen and heard and still feel really lonely. What's so important to say is this: loneliness is an emotion. Emotions are not necessarily facts, right? Because what one thing feels or means to me does not necessarily mean the same or feel the same to you. And so it is our perception of how we are feeling. And so the perception means that there may not be a rhyme or reason to what we are experiencing. And that's so important to know. A lot of times women will sit in front of me and they'll say, I have my husband, I have my children, I have a good work environment, and yet I still feel completely alone. It doesn't make sense. And that is to say that emotions make sense. They don't always, right? But we can do things to make them work for us. This feeling, it comes down to a host of experiences, and honestly, there are way too many to break down in this one conversation. But I want you to remember that it comes down to our physical, our mental, and our emotional needs not fully being met, not only by ourselves, but by those that we want to have in our lives. So important. And there is a big difference of what it means to be lonely and loneliness. And I want to talk about that for just a moment because I think it's going to be really eye-opening to you to understand the difference. I think we've all said it, right? I feel lonely, or I don't want to be alone. I know I hear that so often. And when women come in and say that, they will often describe these experiences that are overwhelming or even depressing. And when I ask, are you lonely or are you alone? Many don't know the difference. So what is the difference? The key difference is emotional attachment. Being alone is a state of being by yourself. Loneliness is a feeling, right back to that understanding that our feelings are not always rational. Loneliness is really an absence, a longing, and sometimes a depressing state. Many of us can mindfully be by ourselves and happy without feeling lonely. And then there are others who have a hard time being alone and therefore become overwhelmed by this state of loneliness. Again, there is no rational understanding to our feelings a lot of times, and that's okay. To go further, you can really know if loneliness is a factor for you in the emotional experience of your life by really drilling down to a few little key things that you can target. And the first one is that you feel a lack of companionship or deep relationships in your life. You have people there no matter what, but you still feel like there's just nothing more than a surface level in your life. You can also feel lonely if you feel left out, right? And that's in any state, whether that's in friendships or community or group or even your family. You can feel left out, and therefore you can begin to feel like there's an active state of loneliness in your life. Another way to look at it is you feel tuned in to the people around you, but you don't feel like there is space for you to be yourself or to be emotional. Again, it's that surface level, but it's in a way that you can't have reactions or you can't feel like you can express yourself, and the authenticity of a relationship is not present. These are some of the factors that will really begin to shift loneliness into an operation that is constant within your life. Of course, there are others, but those are some main things when we're talking about us to the outside world. Loneliness is often tied to the quality of one's relationships, not necessarily the number of connections. I want you to know that because it's really important. A lot of times women will say, well, I only have 3 or 4 friends. And I will ask, okay, that's fine, but are those quality connections? Are those quality relationships? Because it's actually better to have 3 or 4 quality connections than to have 55 acquaintances that do very little for you. So begin to really look at the quality of your relationships as we have this conversation too. And before we go any further, I want you to know that, we all know that connection is important, but if we really stay in a prolonged state of loneliness, our health often takes a hit. Our depression rises, our immune system weakens, there's even an increased heart disease factor in all of this. And of course, anytime we're depressed or we have a mental decline, our blood pressure can go up, and we even see obesity linked to loneliness or feeling alone. It's really safe to say that loneliness interferes with our quality of life. So how can we make changes to release these feelings of loneliness? Of course, again, it doesn't really even matter a lot of times why we feel that way. We can identify it. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But a lot of times it's just that the factor is there. The feeling is there. And anytime we have a feeling, the best thing that we can do is to get our emotions under control and in order, right? We talk so often about emotional intelligence, and this is where it really comes into play. So before you can stop feeling alone or lonely, you have to determine why exactly you feel lonely in the first place. Is it because you miss a certain person, a place, or even a feeling? Do you genuinely lack friendships and people close to you? What is it? Determining why you feel lonely may give you a solution right off the bat. I broke up with so-and-so and therefore I feel lonely. And maybe the solution is to go back. No, girl, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying go back to your ex that did you dirty. I'm saying, what is the solution? The solution in this case would be to heal and give yourself, the opportunity to meet someone who fills the gap that we were talking about, the emotional gap. If we can get down to the why, we can often look at the factors that we really need to be focusing on. Again, do I need a new relationship? Do I need to focus on just myself? We can really look at why we feel that way, connected to the moment that's coming up for us. Again, look at the thoughts, look at the experience, get down to just the facts, and then you can look at why you feel that way. Alternatively, if you hold yourself back from meeting new people because of fear of rejection, you may want to look at the reason why you hold yourself back or tell yourself that you're going to be rejected and weigh whether it's true or not. If you've been constantly told that you're not good enough, that fear is going to run really high in your mind, your body, and even your spirit. So we have to break it down. Is it that you're not actually good enough? Or, this is the big or, is the person who's telling you that you're not good enough actually not good enough for you? Let that hit for just a moment, right? That person that tells you that you are not good enough is not the person for you. You know it, you may reject it, but you know that's the truth. So break it down. What is really at the baseline of all of this? If you miss a certain person, look inward and ask, is there a solution? Why do you feel distance? Is it that you need to reach out and rekindle the relationship if it's healthy? Do you need to make more time and effort? Have you trained this person into leaving you alone because you're always so busy? Really look at how you are showing up. Where is your responsibility? Or if a relationship ended because it wasn't healthy, you can ask yourself, do I miss the experience of this particular person? Or do I miss the experience of closeness? It's generally the closeness that's the answer, right? The experience, and not necessarily the person itself. When a relationship ends, Often there's so much trash in between the two of you that it's hard to even clean it up, right? And so we miss the closeness. We miss the ability to count on this person, not necessarily the person themselves. If you get down to just the facts and you find this is the case, you can ask yourself, can I connect with someone else on the same level? And the answer is always yes. I can't tell you how many times I've heard women say, no one will ever love me the way that they did again. Or I will never love anyone the way that they loved me. Or I hear, I will never be close to someone the way I was to them. Or if it's a sibling or a parent relationship that is strained or broken, I often hear they are supposed to be like this or that, and they are not. I feel left, abandoned, and robbed of the experience that so many other people are having. And of course, that is natural. But is it true that you can't have that same bond with someone else, even on the same level? Just because someone is blood does not mean that they are the best person for you to have in your life. You can always have that experience with someone if you allow the connectivity to be there. It's so important to know that when relationships are, quote, supposed to be a certain way, we really can tie ourselves to being alone or having loneliness as a factor in our lives because they did not meet our expectation or the situation did not meet our expectation. The truth is you can always find something more. You can always find something different. Almost all of our missing and loneliness can be solved by doing a bit of introspective work. Asking yourself, what do I need? Well, I need connection. How will I get there? Well, I have to create connection. How am I going to do that? And then creating a plan. If you can't come to terms with an answer, try journaling and be as detailed as possible. Why do I feel the way that I do? It's an excellent lead-off question. Why do I feel the way that I do? And when you have an answer, ask yourself what needs to be changed. Get to the root cause. Remember, being lonely doesn't mean that you are isolated. It just means that that is the feeling that is active at the moment. A few years ago, I heard this story that I honestly can't remember where it came from, and I'm sure I'm probably adding my own spin to it, but I'm going to share it with you because I think it's so important when we talk about loneliness. So the story goes like this. A woman is walking down a busy sidewalk, and there are people all around her, but she feels really alone. She's in her head, she's watching the people around her. She notices the couples laughing and holding hands. She sees friends that are bantering back and forth, mother-daughter relationships. And all of a sudden, this feeling of absolute isolation and loneliness hits her. She knows no one on that sidewalk. And instead of saying hello or making eye contact with someone, she decides to look up around her. She's surrounded by tall buildings and she just wants to sort of be out of the headspace that she's in. And so she detaches. But as she looks around, she begins to feel smaller and even more unseen, less connected to everything that is around her. Amongst all these people, she is alone. And as she moves with the crowd, others on the sidewalk begin to see that there is a large open hole in the ground and they walk around it. But this woman is so busy being inside of her head, feeling sorry for herself, that she doesn't even see this hole and falls in. Shocked, she begins to, yell for help. But in that moment, she realizes that the only way out is to connect with someone else. Strangers come to her rescue and they pull her to safety. In that moment, in this conversation within herself and the experience around her, she really has two options. One, feel grateful for the fact that she wasn't actually alone, because if she were, no one would have been there to pull her out, right? To help her out. And the other option is to be depressed, to be sad that she fell in and that no one that she wanted, big air quotes around the words wanted, were there to help her in the first place. What I love so much about this story is it truly is the definition of loneliness in the very beginning. The uneasiness of being or perceiving oneself to be alone. Perceiving is the big word here, right? We perceive ourselves to be alone on the busy sidewalk. It's rare. It's so rare that we actually are completely alone in our lives. And I want you to witness that right now because, again, we can look at our definition of loneliness and being alone and decide where we are falling. To be alone is a lot easier than to feel the feeling of loneliness. But most of the time, we're actually not alone. We feel alone, but that isn't the truth. And so we have to look at how are we showing up? What is it that's happening? And have we put this blanket feeling across our lives of loneliness when it is not the truth? So often people will say, oh, yeah, well, I'm not really alone. I have so and so and so and so and so and so, but they don't count. And that is where we have to stop putting our thought process. Of course they count. Their human connection. Just because someone is going to constantly show up for you does not mean that we can downplay their worth in our life. There's always someone there for us. We just have to stop looking around and waiting for other people, other than our core group, other than ourselves, to show up for us. There's always someone there. But are you allowing the mistruth of their worthiness in your life to really take over and diminish their value? In order to get out of this untrue thinking, we have to reframe it. Casting a different light on what it means to be alone changes the way we feel. Again, is it that we are truly alone, or is it that we feel isolated from others? Is it that we really are not appreciating the people who constantly show up for us? What does loneliness mean to you? And when you know, you can reframe it to make it work. I personally love and crave alone time. I need it. I get up early just to have it, right? But others may feel like that's isolation. So you have to determine the level of comfort you have with being alone and go back to the question, what do I need? What do I need to not feel alone in my life? Am I downgrading the worth and the quality of people that are in my experience? Again, I go back to the truth. It's better to have a small army of people supporting you and loving you than it is to have a bunch of people who really are not there for the full connectivity, right? So one of the best things that we can do is to make the most out of our interactions. Again, quality over quantity, and we have to be willing and open. We have to make the most of our time with the people that we share it with. So be open, be willing to share and allow people in. Of course, not everyone has earned the right to hear your full story. But what I'm saying is, if you're with people, truly engage. Listen, ask questions, share, talk about the things that matter to you, about your family, your work, your creative projects, maybe your mutual interest. And ask yourself, what is true connectivity? How can you ever be connected to someone if you're not open and willing to let your guard down? So make the most out of the time that you have. It doesn't matter how many connective points that you have, how much time, quantity time is available to you. From there, I really want you to really start looking at taking care of ourselves and doing the things that make us feel good to allow connectivity with ourselves first and then others. What do I mean by that? I mean, doing the things that you are truly passionate about can really change these feelings of loneliness. In fact, it can completely erase it if you allow it. So I want you to think about the things that always make you feel good. Is it meditating? Great. Go to a group meditation. Sit next to someone you've never spoken to before but seems open. Is it reading? Great. Where is the women's book club of the month, right? Singing? Join a choir. Cooking? Go to Whole Foods or wherever it is that is in your neighborhood that has a fantastic cooking class. Maybe you need to volunteer at the local pet shelter. I don't care. Whatever it is, jump both feet in. Find your like-minded group and begin to nurture your passions in order to create connectivity. Where are your like-minded people? Many use substances to dull the pain of feeling lonely. And here you can use a substance, creativity, inspiration, joy, to do the same thing. Because dulling only temporarily covers the wounds and those feelings, and it doesn't create real change. But if you were there at the cooking class and you met a group of friends that suddenly you can go have dinner with every Wednesday night, doesn't that make a much bigger impact? The answer is yes. So I want you to make plans. Do something that is outside of your norm, get uncomfortable, and do the damn thing, right? Can you imagine walking in and finding a new friend? It's so good. It's so great. If you want connection, guess what? You are the one who has to create it. It's not always going to come to you. It's not always going to land in your lap. You have to be willing to do what you need to. There's also something to be said about getting out of our routine, right? Because when we do the same thing over and over and over again, it can rob the joy of our life. And when there is no joy, we often feel lonely. So I want you to do something that changes the way that you are showing up. You know, sometimes a change of scenery is all you need to be reconnected with yourself. And then that allows you to have like a supercharge of emotional well-being that allows you to connect with others. You know, becoming dependent on your bed or your couch inside the walls of your home is a fast track to depression and loneliness. You have to change it up. What will you require yourself to do in order to step outside of the alone box? That also requires me to say to you, because I see this so often, I can't tell you how many times I see it. But when we feel lonely, it is so easy to fall back and put all of your weight on the people you think are going to fix it for you. So sometimes that's our parents, you know, or a longtime best friend that we aren't actually holding in real esteem for their weight and their position in our lives. And sometimes it's even our therapist, right? And what we're really doing is looking for a distraction for the emotion of loneliness. But my friend, it doesn't work in the long run. You know, these people often become tired of carrying your emotional weight. They get tired of having the conversation about your dissatisfaction in your life. And so we have to say, okay, what is my responsibility? I'm not saying don't reach out. I'm not saying to not rely on someone. I'm saying don't rely on someone else to fix the feeling of loneliness. That's your job. It's an inside job because it is a feeling that is individual to you, right? Again, it really comes back to that question of why do I feel this way and how am I going to change it? If we stay the same, if we sit, if we refuse to help ourselves, loneliness becomes a self-defeating behavior. It becomes a depression point. It becomes an abuse point of our emotions. It becomes even addiction point for a lot of people. And so we have to really get into a place of how am I going to change my feeling? About how to make intentional connection our focus point and create it, I want you to really watch out for warning signs of loneliness and being alone. Because sometimes we become so desperate to get past our feelings that we will continue to cycle around bad influences, around people that hurt us. And sometimes we even get into dirty relationships with new people, right? People that don't have any history with us. And we really allow them to fill our cup emotionally, but it's a fake facade of it. It's actually working against us. So I want you to really look at how you're showing up. Is this the best thing for you? Am I lonely and just putting something as a Band-Aid over the situation? Or am I really truly connecting and creating a better state for myself? So important to look at, so necessary. So let's shift into how this kills our inner peace and our self-love. I want you to think about the fact that every time you feel lonely, that you feel disconnected, you are pushing peace away. right? Because what is loneliness? It's a negative emotion. And when we feel alone, we often kind of cycle down into those really deep negative emotions. We do welcome fear in. I'll never be around anyone who loves me again, right? That's a fear statement. It's an untrue fear statement, but it's a statement of fear. And so we push away self love because then we question, well, if so and so couldn't love me, how is anyone else? If I can't feel fulfilled on my own, how will anyone else be fulfilled with me, right? So our self-love and our inner peace tanks. So we have to get into being intentional with our connections and our state of connectivity. So how do we really shift out of these feelings and into a state of intentionality? I want you to think about what an intention is. It is a driving thought of something you are going to do. It has action behind it, right? So I am. It is an intentional statement. I am going to spend time with people who light my soul on fire. I am going to allow myself space to find new people that fulfill me, right? So intentionality. In being intentional, we allow ourselves to use our energy, our times, our feelings, our emotional resources in ways that best serve us. So let's get into these steps, right? How can we get out of loneliness and into intentionality so we have good connectivity? The first thing is to be deliberate with our thoughts and our time. This is something really important. Is this thought really serving me? That's being intentional with our thought process. Am I allowing my mind to have a positive mindset or a mindset of dissatisfaction? That's a deliberate thought. Is my focus on the right thing? Am I really alone? These are all intentional thought processes. When we are focused in the right way, we can then be more deliberate with our time. We can help ourselves determine what's most important. It comes back to that question, what do I need? When we're focused on what we need, we can actually focus on getting a better result. With this focus, we can slow the negative down. We can really get into a self-boost. We can get into a space that even if we have no one around at that current moment, that we still have the ability to feel our best. One of the questions I love to ask myself personally when I am really moving into connectivity, I ask, is this connection going to boost my feelings long term? Is it going to cost me more than I have to give? Or is it going to fill me up? And will I be able to do the same for someone else? So important. It really does speak to connectivity and gives us that boost that we often need. So the second thing is to become clear and intentional about the results that you want. I want to connect with others, so I will ... go to the cooking class. I want to be connected to an old friend. I'm going to send a text. I'm going to call. I want the connectivity of a new group of people because I want to feel supported. Okay, so what am I going to do to create a new group of friends? Whatever it is, I'm going to be intentional with the result that I want so that I can determine the action that's needed. And that's the next piece, to be mindful about the intentional impact with action. Nothing is going to happen without you putting focus to it, right? When we're stepping out of loneliness, we have to ask ourselves, what action do I need to take in order to create a better connectivity? What will allow me to feel seen and heard? What will feeling seen and heard do for me? What will I intentionally create to have a new experience? Being intentional with our actions is the way we create change. I want you to know that. I want you to know that when we are focused on the right things, when we are clear with the results, and then we take action, the feelings that own us don't own us anymore. That really is the step. That is the step to any emotion, to any negativity, to anything that is drawing us away from our self-love and our inner peace. We have to first find out why, we focus on the right thing, we become clear about the result that we want, and we take intentional, impactful action. It really is that simple. Yes, that's easy for me to say, but it's a practice, so do it, right? It's a practice like everything else we talk about. Once you make that your practice, it is so much easier to stop things in its tracks. It's so much easier to know I can work in my own favor. Because, when we're alone or lonely, we don't have a lot of fun. We don't have a lot of experiences that cause us joy. We tend to have that blanket feeling like everything is bad. Everything is filled with loneliness. There is no happiness. It's a blanket statement that really bleeds into everything. So be intentional. Make the process fun. Make it a present moment awareness. Doing something you care about is a really great way to occupy your thoughts to the point where it becomes difficult to think about your loneliness. Fill your time until you can see the loved one again, until you really make a new meaningful connection. What's important to you? Every time you acknowledge what you're feeling, you give yourself the power to shift it. I made all of that sound really simple. I know I did. And honestly, if you have a level of emotional intelligence, if you have a level of understanding your thought process and what you feel, actually it is quite simple. But if you don't have that yet, there's no shame in reaching out and getting a little bit of help. There are people like myself and others that understand the way that our thought process works. We understand how our feelings work. And if you feel low or hopeless, it is time to reach out and get those tools. You always have the power to shift the inner conversation and the feelings. You always have the power to change what is happening in your life. Sometimes we just need someone to guide us, and that is totally good. It's totally acceptable. It's totally a power move to be able to say, you know what, I can't do this on my own. I'm going to be so brave and courageous that I'm going to have someone walk through this experience with me and hold my hand and show me that I don't have to be alone. And there's nothing wrong with that. When you allow yourself to do that, I want you to really get into a space where you're asking those big questions. Whether you get help or you do it alone, ask these questions because they make all the difference in the world. What do I want? I want to not feel alone. What do I need? I need connectivity. I know that as a human, it is a part of my makeup. It's a part of my DNA, and I'm not going to fight that anymore. How do I want to feel? I want to feel good. I want to actually feel like I'm connected to someone who gives a damn about me. And there's nothing wrong with that. How will I get there? You know what? I'm going to allow myself to go to the new place. I'm going to allow myself to reach out. I'm going to allow myself to have permission to do what I need and what I want. And then lastly, I'm going to throw a fifth question on here. How will I make choices and changes that are going to best support myself and my needs? The truth is, you're not alone. Just like the lady who fell into the hole and had to get help to get out, you're never alone. Even if you're standing in a room full of thousands of people and you feel disconnected, you're not alone. Loneliness is a state of your emotions. You always have the power to shift any emotion. The only way through a moment, an emotion, is through it. You have the power to shift it. Remember that. You are always worthy of shifting. It's also an essential step into getting your life together. So do it. Don't let loneliness be the factor that keeps you from your self-love and your inner peace. You deserve peace. You deserve love. You deserve to feel connected. So use these steps. Use these little pieces of practices to really change how you're showing up. It is so important, and you are worthy of that. Thank you so much for listening to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. If you've enjoyed these tips for bettering your life and are seeking daily inspiration and additional tools and tips, follow me on social media at Get Your Life Together Girl on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. You can also visit our show notes and my blog at my website, getyourlifetogethergirl.com. While you're there, check out the Women's Circle. There's over 100 downloadable practices and monthly meetings where we join together and have connectivity. It's only $9 a month, and it's done over Zoom. Again, you can visit getyourlifetogethergirl.com to find all of those details. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others.